On another side of the hypercosmos, KLEIO was spat out. Hecate and Friedrich followed in escort. Only KLEIO threw up, because of the shock she had suppressed until just now, and simply because she was not used to this kind of locomotion.
Just let it out,
the dog said suspiciously, coming closer.
Don't you dare eat my vomit now, Friedrich. I swear to you. If you want me to feel better, just stay away from it.
KLEIO's imagination was enough for one more reflex.
Did I create this universe?
She asked after her stomach remained stable. The question itself brought another rumbling with it.
You already know,
Hecate replied.
So why are you still bothering me with the question?
Do Brina and the others really exist? Or did I spin it all?
Believe us, both variants are much closer to each other than you might think.
Friedrich spoke up, which didn't help one bit.
Out of subjective reality grows intersubjectivity.
How is all this possible?
Please don't ask me questions that would take me ages to explain to you,
growled Hecate almost. Despite her human appearance, her reactions seemed at times bestial, like a hellhound in contrast to a domesticated Friedrich. KLEIO was already feeling better in turn.
If you can't tell me what is happening to me so that I can understand it, how are you going to help me?
Just because we can see you are broken does not mean we can do anything about it.
Hecate clarified.
What we can do is get you to someone who might be able to.
And Friedrich added,
The emphasis is on maybe.
Then maybe rather not,
concluded KLEIO. Getting no answer, Friedrich's dog's eyes spoke volumes.
Why are you actually a dog now?
KLEIO wanted to know from him.
And where has the little version of you gone?
Yesterday we were an old man. Tomorrow, we may be a baby. We are always us. We absorbed this wastrel before he could grow too much, but we're bound to grow a new one. They are a real plague.
She avoided imagining it. If she wanted to avoid throwing up again, Hecate was the more appropriate choice for a conversation.
An impressive trick. That with the time, by the way. Can I do something like that? Now that I'm already accidentally creating worlds and such?
Hecate stopped abruptly, visibly suppressing her anger.
Such a trick costs me quite a bit of substance. And no, I'm certainly not going to teach you how to do something like that. Don't get cocky. You wasted all your essence, and that's why you were stuck there. What you did was done without any understanding of how to work it and of the consequences. You don't have the slightest clue how unnecessary the trouble is you're causing me. So do me a favor for a while and shut up, at least as long as I'm trying to track down this slippery son of a bitch.
Although KLEIO had a myriad of questions coming to her, she was simply stonewalled. The most pressing question of all. If she was imagining a world, had someone at some point done the same to hers? Hecate would not give her an answer. And Friedrich hardly in a way KLEIO understood. It was maddening. Hopefully, the ominous stranger would be able to help her. It took a while, relatively speaking, in a place where time did not exist. KLEIO perceived it as such, forced to wait with the dog, who couldn't even be petted in good conscience. In the silence of the pneumosphere, the sterile vacuum of a blank canvas, to which all possibilities were open, she lacked a sense of time. For the fact that time here supposedly had no form, it took far too long for KLEIO. Just as she was about to address it, Hecate came out of her meditation, as if it had brought her back from the astral realms.
I've got him.
Without explanation, she took KLEIO by the arm again, and the surrounding space abruptly inverted into a city. Not Keltoin. This one she left behind. One that came unexpectedly for KLEIO, although it took her to no other more frequent in her life. They ended up in the park in front of one of its most characteristic sights. Monstre hideux, in French, or English, hideous monstrosity, as some of the residents called it at the time of its completion, who were less appreciative of the sight of it. Quite in contrast to the myriads of tourists who nowadays came here on pilgrimage. They stood on the Allée Jean Paulin, in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower.
Paris?
Asked Cleo in wonder, swallowing the ending like a pro. At the same time, an indescribable feeling of relief came over her. The feeling of having arrived home after an adventure when she had already stopped believing in it. It must have been similar for Odysseus after his Odyssey when he returned to Ithaca. However, Cleo's Odyssey did not come to an end. Something told her that the real hurdle was yet to come.
City of Love,
Friedrich added. He sniffed at the dark outline of a fresh stain, then covered with his own marking afterward, and sent a message to the dogs, which they probably understood with difficulty.
What are you looking at us like that for?
He asked Cleo.
It happened naturally.
He noticed himself.
Be quiet, dog.
Hecate said.
This is not your Paris, Cleo.
Of course it is.
She objected.
I practically grew up in this area. My buddy Francois works at the cafe on the next street.
She spoke with pure conviction.
Go look if you don't believe me.
Hecate returned grumpily. For Cleo, it was clearly obvious that this was her Paris. The atmosphere, the buildings, even the smell. This je ne sais quoi. There was only one place in the universe where the elements appeared in this order. The dog trotted after her as she came to the next intersection. She expected to find one of her favorite bistros. It was possible that Francois just had his shift as garçon. Perhaps there were even 3 pieces of their exquisite quiche left. She didn't know where Hecate got the certainty from that she would notice it at the crossroads, whether she was commonly aware of what went on at those. What she discovered there proved beyond all doubt that it was not her Paris after all. Where the bistro should have been, there was a ploughed field with crystalline earth like stardust of antimony. And where people should have enjoyed la douceur de vivre, something alike was gathered. A gathering of figures, human in bizarre interpretation. As if the one who created them did not quite know what people looked like, or had only just begun to create some. The work of a bungler. As a basis, one had probably crossed something like ginseng with mushrooms, and from this, like Geppetto, carved them into Pinocchios. They chattered in an incomprehensible language that sounded more like a jazzy scat than a conversation. Some of them tilled the field, and others were buried in it up to their necks, being tilled, and worked by artificial hands. They were making themselves and chattering with each other. Where Cleo had expected to encounter a familiar face, she looked aghast at the macabre spectacle without understanding it. Hecate approached her leisurely.
I told you this is not your Paris.
She spoke.
It is his. He created this place, which isn't one, where the pneumosphere and your sphere intersect.
It wasn't so much that Cleo thought she was a liar, as that she had trouble grasping that it wasn't Paris, but the utopia of the one they were seeking out.
Everything feels so authentic.
Cleo said, impressed.
Of course it does. He's had enough practice at it. Besides, his creation overlaps in many places with other versions of Paris, probably to make him feel like he's still one of you.
Even if the creator of this version of Paris here was closer to a god,
Whoever can create something like this on purpose is surely capable of helping me. No?
Hecate just shrugged. There was no guarantee. Only Friedrich gave his opinion.
All who produce or possess pneuma in a form can shape the reality of their sphere according to their will. But to treat a foreign metaphysical body requires some more skill,
He explained with little optimism. Cleo remembered how he had mentioned that his kind did not produce pneuma.
If you can do such things, Hecate, does it mean that you were once a human being?
She wanted to inquire from her, not expecting a detailed answer. This time, her expectation turned out to be unfounded. Hecate shed the rough protective cloak and let her look deeper into her soul.
If I ever was one, that part of me died when I became what I am. Only the now exists, and everything that happened or would have happened to me before that ceased to be. So no, to answer your question, I am not a human being. And yet, I am more like you than you might think. But the path to enlightenment is an individual one.
The sentence seemed to follow her. Although KLEIO had trouble seeing similarities, she got the feeling that she understood Hecate a little better. She didn't want to pester her with questions. One more intruded on her mind.
Why did it take so long for you to show up anyway? At Spree Park, you told me you'd be right back.
Halfway, it sounded like an accusation.
I wish I could say you were the only problem I have to deal with. Alas, no. Besides, you left right after that. You can't imagine how hard it is to track down someone, as far away as you are. And when I found your frequency, I joined you instantly.
KLEIO could only vaguely make sense of this explanation. It did little good to rack her brains over it. They continued along the route, coming alongside a populated Seine walkway of millions of couples, which KLEIO knew all too well, and again felt confusingly similar to the Parisian original. This time, however, the passers-by were undoubtedly human, which was due to the fact that this utopia and the real thing overlapped. Slightly alienated, KLEIO wound her way past the human dimensions, wondering who was real here, and who was not. What real per se still meant to her.
Look at them, your kind.
Hecate told her.
So much potential without a clue how to use it.
A modicum of pity resonated, in the sense, these poor creatures.
You can't see the rainbow of their pneuma. But we're wading through a river of it right now.
Which seemed ironic next to the Seine.
Then the people here are really real?
Most of them are. Kind of. They don't know how often they cross the boundaries of their own existence, or how often they step over the edge of their own world. Every step they take is done without awareness of the ultimate truth. They do not even know about the exact existence of pneuma, even if some make use of it subconsciously. Strangely enough, it is often those with the strongest release who control it the least. Their ego resists it because it leads to its destruction.
She followed Hecate deeper into the twists and turns of the imaginary city. The alleys grew narrower and narrower. Walls of brickwork pressed closer together, so that at the next corner, they had to pass through a gap between the buildings that turned out to be impossible to pass through as a well-fed or already well-developed person. Contradicting logic, Hecate walked through with ease, and the dog trotted after her effortlessly. Naturally, KLEIO became a little confused when she suddenly had the feeling of being stuck. After all, she was significantly smaller than Hecate. Panic almost set in, with the pressure of two houses squeezing her between them. Straining, she pressed further along the walls until she finally came to freedom in the courtyard behind. To her disappointment, the entrance she had just squeezed through was the only way in here. The rest was enclosed by walls.
Now what?
Asked KLEIO.
Will you say the magic word and conjure us a door?
Don't get silly,
Hecate replied, as if that had been the most foolish guess that could be made. The assumption itself wasn't so naive, more the notion that she had to utter a magic word. What she did, however, was to scan the walls one after the other. KLEIO watched helplessly until Hecate found the desired spot. She knocked 3 times, and all at once, the wall receded into the distance. The claustrophobic backyard expanded abruptly, and a whole new street opened up in the cul-de-sac. A whole new street, and entirely his street. It took shape before them, thriving out of the bricks. Splendid, immaculate and spotless, as one imagined a suburb of the well-heeled, even though they were wandering around the center a moment ago. At the end stood an unusual house, the retreat of the ominous stranger on the Rue Travers. The architecture had traits of downtown Paris, rustic yet classic, while it somehow exuded the flair of a witch's cottage or a Gothic-haunted house. KLEIO could not possibly tell who inhabited such a house, almost hiding behind Hecate. The latter used the iron door knocker, shaped like a horned lion's head. The door opened, and out came the master of the house. With all her imagination, she never expected a shaman named Mary Poppins, who looked like a Satanist. Stay tuned for weekly chapters. Like, share, and subscribe for more wacky adventures. We thank you for your support.